Hello and welcome to Radio Cowichan's Open Mic News Backgrounder interview. Today's topic is where has all the water gone? We'll look at the worsening low water level in Cowichan Lake, its causes, the huge implications, and we'll explore what's being done and is it being done fast enough. I have two guests today, Parker Jefferson and Joe Cecil. Parker, I'll get you to introduce yourself first and let us know some of the organizations you're involved in.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm co-chair of the Cowichan Stewardship Roundtable. I'm a director with a group called One Cowichan, and I'm also director with the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society. I live on the river down by Satlam.
Okay. And Joe, how about yourself?
I have lived here on the river all my life. I was just below the road pool, little beach, on the run that's called the Willow Run. I have guided for over 45 years, and I'm retired now from guiding. I have been in the past chairman of the South Island chapter of the Steel Society for 10 years, and a life member of the BC Wildlife Federation. And at the moment, I've started the group Friends of the Cowichan.
Thank you, Joe, and I'm sure your name is familiar to a lot of folk here in the valley. First, I'll ask Joe again, can you give us a brief overview of your general take on the current water situation and the drought situation?
Yes, Mike. Right now, the river is at 5.5 cubic meters. It's been like that for a long time, and it's an unprecedented year of really, really low water because of the no snowpack and no rain in May or June. So it's extreme dire straits, and if it keeps going, we are really going to be in a lot of trouble.
And that's why you're here to talk to us about that, Joe. Parker, how about your overview?
Well, we've seen the effects of climate change over the past decade or so. Our summer rainfall is declining quickly, and it's now at about 35% of what it used to be in the 80s. And of course, as Joe mentioned, the no snowpack at all this year, and that's been declining. So pretty clearly, we're going to need to store more water in order for us to get through the summer. We're very fortunate with the geography we have here and with the huge lake at our headwaters. 1 centimeter of water in that lake will run the river at 7 cubic meters per second for 24 hours. So it's pretty easy to do the math to figure out how much we need to raise the weir up in order to store more water so that we can have a good, healthy river through the entire summer and fall, and then hold that water back when we get it in the winter.
Boy, I'm sure glad you made it easy to understand like that, because part of my history is in water and water control, and I know the listeners don't want to hear about acre feet of storage. That's a little too much. But you mentioned storage in the lake. We have a unique situation here. I must confess to being a newcomer to the lake area. I live in Yubo. I've lived there for over 10 years, and I'm not sure of the history of the weir. But I understand one of our guests here, Joe Cecil, is very, very knowledgeable on the situation. So, Joe, can you give us a bit of a history of the weir, why it was built in the first place?
Yeah, Mike. It was built in 1956, and one of the main reasons, of course, was to hold water in the lake for storage so that Crofton pulp mill could have water for the pulp mill. But at the same time, fisheries, both DFO and MOE, provincial and federally, they liked the idea so that you could have a guaranteed water supply during the summertime of 7 cubic meters. So they welcomed that idea.
Great. So 7 cubic meters flow was the target at the time. Both the federal fish, the salmon, and the provincial fish, the trout, are recognized as being able to survive in that, and it also provided enough water for the mill at the time. So that's where we've come from. However, Parker has mentioned in his comments that we don't quite have enough storage to get through anymore, and the flows that you mentioned are substantially less than 7. Doesn't seem much more than 5, but believe me, in water flow, it's a critical difference. So we have in the general public a perception that somebody should do something, and that's really, you hear that on the street. Somebody ought to do something. Well, guess what? What nobody really seems to dig into until I noticed your comment on one Cowichan, Parker. Who is the somebody that should be doing something, and what is it that they should do?
As a community, we're quite well aware of the situation where we do need to store more water. So that's been known for a long time. I know Joe has been fighting for this for decades. Back in the 80s, there was talk about we need to raise the weir. What we have now just isn't adequate. It's barely adequate to run the mill. And we have to remember that mill is the largest employer in our region. And there's a lot of union jobs in that mill that pay really good wages. And it would be not a good thing if it was forced to shut down. It costs the mill and it costs a lot of our community members paycheck. And that's something that we are all working towards not having to do. So certainly the weir we have is a good thing. If we didn't have it, we'd be in really serious trouble, but we do. And the thing is, it just needs to be raised up. We need to store more water. It's clear from the fact we're just not getting the summer inflows. So there is a move afoot. There's been progress made over the past few years. CVRD is leading the way in terms of reconstructing the weir to be able to hold more water. They have applied for BC provincial gas tax revenue funding to the order of about $10 million to get started with this project. Now, we don't know yet exactly what it will cost because the engineering studies have not yet been done, but 10 to 12 million is a good ballpark figure. We know that has to occur as soon as possible. The first step in the process, though, is going to be someone has to apply for another water license. Catalyst currently owns the water license. They hold the water license. I think they have 2 or 3 of them, one on top of the other. But so far to date, they have not been willing to take on another water license for storage, which would really be primarily for fish, because they claim they've got enough storage to operate their mill. I would argue that this year they'll find they don't quite have enough storage to operate their mill. I'd be very surprised if they're still in operation by the end of September if we don't get serious rain. So the community knows what needs to happen. We need to reconstruct the weir. We need to store more water. That process is ongoing, and it does seem that we're making significant progress well beyond what's happened for the past 10 years or so. And we can look forward to, in the next few years, hopefully getting that reconstruction done.
I'd like to get Joe's take on the situation, what's being done and what needs to be done, and is it being done fast enough? And I think you have a good ability to be really direct and to the point. So somehow I just get that feeling after just meeting you. Could you please give us your opinion?
Yeah, Mike. To me, it's very, very simple, and it has been. The answer's been there all along. In 1991, there was a study called the KPA study done by the engineers, and it was a joint study between DFO and MOE, and those are the 2 agencies that are responsible for fish. Federal is for the salmon and provincially for the trout and steelhead. Now this conservation license, this is what it would be if we restructured the weir. That's the logical choice. And either one of those ministers could do it immediately right now. And the answer has been there since 1991. And it's just so frustrating and so simple. And the minister could just tell his staff to apply for that water license, but nobody has the political will to do it, and so there's no leadership from them. So this is who should be doing it, and the answer, like I say, has been there. Go ahead and do it, because this project would do so much, not only for fish but for people. Most of the wells in this valley are hooked up to the Cowichan River. And if the water goes down to below 4.5, a lot of those wells will go dry. At 4.3, the pulp mill has to shut down. which is $1 million a day to the valley. And the sewage distribution for North Cowichan, once you go down below 4.3, is in real jeopardy. So we have a solution. And it's a win-win situation for everybody because it is a weir, not a dam. It's only made for summertime height. So it does not affect any flooding at all of anybody on the lake. And yet, we're still at the point of where we were when we did the original study back in 1990, and we're still sitting there rather than going ahead on it.
I'll bet any money when you were involved at that time, you did not want to be sitting here in this chair being interviewed in the year 2015 about, gee, we got a problem. What should we do?
You're telling me because at our flows meetings, sometimes we're going to 3 and 4 meetings a week on this, as if we can do anything. Mother Nature's going to do it all by rain. And I keep saying the same thing. Why we should never even be sitting here. We should be enjoying our deck at home and enjoying the summertime or doing something else rather than being at meetings, because if this was being done then, we wouldn't have a problem right now.
You're a great fellow to talk to, Joe. Thank you very much. Joe, you just gave us a very good answer on the question of the weir and how long it's been needed, and how we'd much rather be somewhere else right now than talking about this situation yet again. Do you ever get that feeling, meat, that's all we ever do?
All the time.
I'd like to go to Parker now. And Parker, I know that we're not alone in the low water department. The whole province is experiencing this new reality for us, and it's called drought. Is Cowichan Lake in a better situation than other lake systems, or could we be?
Yeah, I think we are. We're really lucky that we've got this beautiful big lake as a headwater. The water tests out really pure, and the Stewardship Society monitors that on a weekly basis. A lot of really good fresh water in that lake, and other Vancouver Island rivers that don't have lakes in their headwaters are in serious trouble this year. They are likely to go completely dry. Now that's obviously going to have a very bad effect on many of the fish species that utilize those rivers. There really isn't anything that can be done to the rivers that don't have any kind of water storage in their headwaters this year, because there really wasn't much snow anywhere on the island. And Vancouver Island is one of the driest, I think it is the driest part of the province currently. There's been rain even in the Okanagan, everywhere else but here. So yeah, the rivers are going to suffer this year. We're going to lose a lot of salmon and trout in other systems, and perhaps even in this one. But with the ability to store water in our lake, that sets us apart, and that's the blessing we have. And that's what kept us going for so many decades, having that summer water storage. Back in the old days, of course, before all the logging happened, the river was quite different. It had large old-growth trees around it. It was much narrower, much deeper, and much cooler, more shade, more woody debris, all that sort of thing. But unfortunately, the logging practices of the past have essentially widened the river and filled it with gravel, all the gravel coming from erosion in the headwater tributaries. So with that, we've got a man-made problem, but we also have a man-made solution in that weir. We need to have a higher flow in the summertime, and by simply increasing the height of the weir, we will be able to hold back more water when we get it in the wintertime and save it through the summer, metering it out into the river as required for salmon migration and for general fish health. So yes, I think we're in a good position. We know what has to be done. We just got to get it done.
Parker, I'm always confused, I must admit, by that word, the rule curve. The height of the lake is determined by a rule curve that causes water to be released at a certain prescribed rate. And my question is, who is the silly bureaucrat that has his hand on the plug and pulls the plug out of the river system, out of the lake, to let it drain out of all that nice wintry water that's in there, so we can be dried up and parched through the summer? What's with that?
Well, the rule curve is an arbitrary set of circumstances that really needs to go away, and it will go away as we reconstruct the weir. But it was set up with the weir, and it was designed, I think, to mitigate any concerns that lakeshore residents would have about summertime flooding. Of course, the weir has nothing to do with wintertime flooding. So that curve simply states that at a certain time, I believe it's now currently the 21st of July, if the weir is full, it can no longer be kept full and must be drained down. And so it's a straight line pretty much until the 4th of November. You can cross-reference it like on a graph, and so you could see on August 13th the lake's supposed to be at this level. That's, of course, ridiculous. You don't ever want to spill water unnecessarily in the current circumstances. We now understand that, and I think all of those who have been pushing for this rule curve also understand that it makes no sense ever to dump water unnecessarily into the ocean given our current climatic situation. So the rule curve is still there. We in 2013, after the 2012 drought, we applied to hold back more water for an extra 2 weeks in July. It used to be July 1st if the weir was full. You had to start dumping water. That occurred in 2012 and it caused quite a bit of concern in the conservation community. Appeals were made then to allow us to keep the weir full past that July 1st date, and they were denied by the controllers. Simply going by the law, they're statutory decision makers and they make the calls. Nope, you can't do that. You got to dump the water, and it was dumped, and then we had the 2012 drought. In 2013, we applied for, and there were public hearings held, and we extended that period to July 21st is when you have to start dumping water if the weir is full. Of course, we never got anywhere near that this year. And so there was an appeal by 6 of the lake shore residents over that. And that appeal process lasted a year, and finally the ruling came down just recently, where it stated that there are significant downstream benefits to storing more water in this lake. And also, one of the concerns that had been out there from some of the lakeshore residents was flooding, of course. Being close to the lake, you would certainly naturally be concerned about flooding. And it was determined that the 164 meter elevation, which is our winter high water mark, that's the standard for flooding. So any water held below 164 meters in elevation is not considered expropriation of their land, and so there's no compensation due to them for water storage below the 164 meter elevation. Our current weir is 162.37 meters in elevation. So as you can see, when the weir is full, we're still nowhere near the winter high water mark, so there is simply no compensation due. Their appeal was denied, and so we go on with now a set of rules that are in place and some judicial proceedings indicating that 164 meters elevation is where we need to be concerned about expropriation of land of property owners who may have property under that elevation. So it's a very complicated situation. It's been going on for decades. There's been a lot of misinformation spread about how you're going to be flooded from house and home if the weir is raised. But people now understand the winter high water mark is much higher than any proposed elevation of the weir, and certainly much higher than our current weir. And also, the winter high water mark is caused by the Greendale Trestle area, which is a pinch point and the outlet of the river, and that's what causes the high water. It overtops the weir. As Joe has mentioned, it's a weir, not a dam. So a weir, that means it's only seasonally in operation, and it has nothing to do with the winter high water mark.
You are a knowledgeable man on this topic.
Yes, I've been studying it since I've been here. I haven't been here long, but it's been in my craw for a few years, and I'm happy to be able to disseminate this accurate information whenever I get an opportunity.
I'm going to get you more. I'm going to touch on that topic more later in our interview. Joe, I wonder if you have some words you'd like to say about that topic.
Parker's described it very, very well. I don't know if I really need to go into it more. All I know is that that people for years use the red herring of they're going to be flooded out, and that's not true. We know that the level is a lot below, even if we raise the weir. So it's like I said before, it's a win-win situation for all. Nobody's getting flooded, and yet we still have a lot of water in the lake and a lot of water in the river if we raise the weir.
Joe, you mentioned earlier that even the amount of stored water in people's wells is determined by basically the level of the aquifer that's driven by the height of the lake.
Well, because of the Cowichan River, I mean, there's a lot more water underground than there's above ground. So therefore, everybody's well, which so many of us are in the valley, out like in the CBRD, are hooked up to the Cowichan River aquifer is what it really is. And if that lake keeps going down and the river drops, we don't get rain, and we'll say it even goes down to like below storage, which is at 4.5, and keeps going to 2.5 cubic meters, what will happen to those wells? Most of those wells will go dry, and it's going to cause an extreme hardship for people in this valley. Sewage distribution. North Cowichan's sewer is in serious dire straits after 4.3, and we're not from 5.5 to 4.5 is what Crofton would like to take it down to right now, is not that far away, and so a lot of things are affected by not having this weir not raised and having storage of water, from wells to the mill shutting down, to sewer distribution to fish.
I have this crazy vision. I have these from time to time. Please don't let this go out to the public. Oops, too late. I have a vision of the Martin Mars air tanker that's now finally back in the air, that I've enjoyed watching and realizing that our water from Cowichan Lake is helping to keep the province safe from fires. I've seen that machine scoop down and take up a whole belly full of water and then fly away again with those expert pilots at the controls. And I'm just thinking, given this progression that's happening right now, they're soon going to be dropping down out of the sky, scooping up a belly full of rocks and mud from Cowichan Gulch, the place that used to be Cowichan Lake. So that's my little, cartoon entry for people's ears right now.
It could happen.
So, what about Parker? What do you think about the far-reaching implications, rather, of the situation, and how much worse could it get, and how can we make it so much better?
Well, the implications, Joe and I are both fly fishermen. That's why I'm here. I retired to live on the river and be able to go fishing. Well, no one can go fishing this summer. South Island, all rivers are closed to fishing, with a couple of exceptions, but pretty much all the rivers, including the Cowichan, there's no angling. Cowichan Tribes has also voluntarily shut down their food fishery, and they're not fishing at all for anything that might be in the river. So this is a significant implication. Cowichan Tribes has traditional use of this resource. The salmon that come up the river at this time of year, and they do, strangely enough, it may be hard to believe, used to be the predominant salmon run in this river. Now they're down to just a handful of fish. There's actually a fish counter in my backyard right now. DFO is operating it. We're trying to get data on the remnants of the spring run Chinook salmon. And so far we've counted about 50 of these fish that have swum by my place, most often at night. We have not found them. We have another counter up here at the weir, and we have not seen them go by that yet. So pretty clearly they're holding in the river in the deep canyon pools in all likelihood. Swim counts are now being done to try to find them. We've only located one so far. But this run of Chinook salmon is of great interest to the government. DFO is quite concerned about them. We want to locate where they're holding. They could be a genetically separate species or group from the fall run Chinook, which is now our predominant salmon run. So the far-reaching implications of this drought really affect the fish. As Joe is well aware, this river has for 100 years been more than 100 years has been a destination angling resort. The angling opportunities on this river traditionally were exceptional. People would travel from all over the world in the early 20th century. Imagine what it would be like to come here from Austria in 1905. You get on a boat, you go across the Atlantic, you get on a train, you go across Canada, you get on another boat, and you come here to go fishing. Franz Ferdinand used to do that. He's the Archduke of Austria, who was assassinated and started World War I. But that was not uncommon for this river. And so we do have a tremendous resource, a renewable resource in angling and fishing. So the fish are suffering when the water is this low, primarily because of temperature. When the water temperature reaches 24 degrees, that's lethal for all salmonid species. And we're getting close to that on several occasions. Now, fortunately, in our river, there are places where cool water enters, and the fish know that. You will not find fish anywhere in this river now if you're swimming with a snorkel and looking for fish. The only places you'll find them is in areas where there is a spring coming into the river or there's a tributary entering with cool water, because that's the only place they can survive. So we're all a lot concerned about the water temperature, and when the flow is as low as it is right now, that pretty much isolates all those salmon that have swum up the river, really are stuck where they're at now because there's not enough water for them to really move up into the lake where they'd prefer to be, and also the skinny areas of the river that are almost impassable are also too warm for them, so their bodies will not be able to handle the stress involved with moving. So they're all just going to hunker down in those deep pools and try to make it through the summer. Those are the long reach implications. I mean, there are implications for the companies running their pulp mill and all the employment and everything that goes with that. But I'm a lot concerned about the fish as well, and many of us are. So we're doing what we can to enumerate what's there and try to protect the fish that we have left.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here about the commercial use of the water. A strategically timed maintenance shutdown of anybody's mill at a time when there perhaps is a low supply of pulp or a low supply of water would be very fortuitous for them. They wouldn't have to, they could run the pulp at a time when they could collect it when it was cheap and have a shutdown when it was expensive. They can run their mill when there's water, and if the water runs out, well, it's a good time for a shutdown. I'd hate to be I am a devil's advocate in that case. There are things that can be sort of covered, and I guess that's sort of what an investigative reporter thinks about. But I don't claim to be one of those. I'm just curious, and so I'll just get off that soapbox, and I'll ask or just mention recently, Parker, you posted a blog about Cowichan Lake, the weir, and the catalyst connection. I'd like you to tell us, was there one particular thing that prompted you to speak out and make that sort of blog entry?
Well, we've got what's called the social license now in our community to reconstruct the weir. It took decades to get it. There was a lot of fear about litigation from lakeshore residents. I think that would be the primary fear because of this business of storing water against their wishes in the summertime. That's all gone away now due to the appeal board ruling, which stated there is no compensation due for any water held below 164 meters. So now the way is clear legally. And the CDRD has mentioned that they felt they have the social license to go ahead and do this. So they have taken a point on this, and they're applying for the money, and they're trying to gather the consensus required and try to figure out doing engineering studies to figure out just exactly how high we should go with it, how much more water is required to get us through the summer and still have adequate flows in September and October before the fall rains so that the salmon can migrate up the river. That's the main focus of it. All that stuff is being done, but so far Catalyst has not been a part of the process. Catalyst, of course, owns and operates the weir, and it is there for the benefit of their mill. Granted, the increased storage will be more for conservation of fish and for the health of our entire watershed ecosystem, not necessarily just their mill, but they will benefit from a more secure supply of water. And we feel that they need to now step up and get more directly involved with the process. I believe that they will. I have been assured from some Catalyst employees that the message has been received at the mill and that they are preparing to step up now and be counted and become a part of this process. And the thing they could bring to the table that we cannot do as conservation groups is get the eye and the ear of the federal and provincial governments and get them directly involved in the process. That's the role that they can play. They don't need to really put in all the money. They may put in some of the money. I can see there being a split, but we will need support, and we will need financial support from all levels of government to make this happen. And when Catalyst does get more directly involved with the process, we can look forward to that happening.
Okay, there's the seeds of a new program. Another interview with some other folks. How come business interest has more particular and more clout with the provincial and federal governments than the lowly little voters that are saying, here's an idea? Okay, that's, like I say, a time for another interview. Joe, we haven't heard from you so much lately. Back in the day when you were involved in this idea that raising the weir was a good idea, before all the engineers and scientists and everybody got involved and said, oh, gee, they had a good idea back then, maybe we should look more into it. Were there naysayers at that time? Was there opposition, or was it more generally accepted than the hoops and hurdles that the present group has had to go through to gain political license?
There was. I remember the very first meeting that we went to on it after the KPA study came out, and George Reed was the section head in the NIMO of fisheries, and we went to that meeting, and I told George, you better be careful, because there might be a lot of naysayers there, and he didn't think there would be anybody, because he said, how could people not agree with raising weir when it's not going to hurt nothing, yet be good for everybody and be good for fish? But lo and behold, when we went to that meeting, he was literally almost torn apart over it. And another meeting in Duncan, that was in Lake Cowichan, and another meeting in Duncan the next night, he had the same reaction from people, because they were saying, oh, people are going to be flooded out. And also, in those days, the figure was only $330,000 to raise the weir. And the Crofton would not pay that amount of money to do it. So anyway, the public were using that as an excuse to be a naysayer, saying my tax dollar's not going to do it if it's going to go to a company. So that was one of the reasons that it didn't get raised then. Later they realized that was a mistake and they should have gone for that. But by then their forces had joined together, and it's ever been like that ever since. And they got political and more or less threatened governments about litigation and all these sort of things. So therefore it never ever did get done. And we've been fighting ever since to try and turn that around. But governments have set their, kind of etched in stone that they're not going to go ahead on it. But hopefully in the future they will.
Well, if I understand the comments from the two of you at the present time, the folks that were on that it's going to flood my land soapbox have had the soapbox removed, and so there's one less cog in the wheel that is plugged. It's now sort of that wheel is ready to turn, as I understand what you guys are telling me. I'd like to let our listeners know that today's program is not intended to be just a short soundbite and then move on to the next news story in the cycle. In today's show, we have time to investigate the backstory in more depth, and we've done quite a bit of that so far. And Parker, at the present time, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the main ideas that you hope to convey when you put together the blog that One Cowichan picked up and put on their website.
Yeah, well, One Cowichan started actually in 2012 as a response to the first really significant drought crisis that we had. My background is in media. I grew up in Victoria, but most of my working life I was in Vancouver. I ran a company that used to make television commercials and corporate videos and things, and so we did a lot of work with media. And I understand, the importance of getting the word out. I understand the importance of stations like this that can broadcast important local news and stories to people who are directly affected by it. You don't get that from the big TV channels. You don't get that from the CTV News and all the rest of that. So it's really important to get involved. I saw a need in 2012 for the public to become more informed about all the things that we've been talking about today, and so we did that. And Joe's been here forever. I grew up in Victoria, moved away, but always knew this would be a great place to live. And when I got to retire, here I am, bought a place on the river, and I do get to go fishing a lot. But what I've also done is gotten involved with many other local organizations here in the Valley. As I've mentioned, the Stewardship Society and One Cowichan and the Stewardship Roundtable, amazing groups of people. And there are so many of us working together. It's not just me. It's all levels of government. Their representatives show up and they all understand what's going on. We share information regularly. Like Joe says, we have a lot of meetings, but we're making some progress. And at those meetings, we get to know what each of us is doing and we coordinate our efforts. And it's a tough battle, but we're all working together for a resolution. And along the way, we've actually become friends. Our last Stewardship Roundtable meeting was held at Stoltz Park, where we had a barbecue and just all stood around in the sunshine. We did a bit of business, but then just mostly got to socialize. And so all of us, I would say hundreds of people in this valley working together, have become friends. We're all working toward the same thing, and everybody is picking up their weight and pulling it along. And the point of my blog was Catalyst needs to add their weight to the efforts that are going on by so many hundreds of people in our community that have been working together for years trying to solve this issue. As Joe has said, it's simple. We know what needs to be done. We need to do it as quickly as possible. And that's the focus of the blog that I wrote. For those who might want to read more detail, I've got the archive of blogs I've been writing for the past several years is at the website One Cowichan, that's O-N-E, cowichan.ca. You'll see the blog in there, and it's not just me writing in there, but many topical issues. One Cowichan's function is connecting citizens, getting people to understand the important issues that are happening in our community and what they can do about them. And so that's what we do on our website.
That's great, Parker. Thank you. And Joe, did you ever think that after all the work you put into this, that so many people that moved here afterwards and so many people that have been here for a while would jump on the bandwagon and help you old-timers out?
Well, to be honest, I didn't think we'd even have to wait to get to this stage, because it's so simple that why wouldn't we have done it a long time ago? I'd hoped all along that it was just going to get done by a government that had the leadership idea in their head, and we wouldn't have to be here where we're at. So. But I sure welcome everybody that has jumped on board, and maybe one day we will actually see that we're raised.
Well, that's going to end my show, and I'm going to end on Joe's words. It's just so simple. Today our guests have been Parker Jefferson and Joe Cecil. You're listening to the Open Mic News Backgrounder on CICV Radio Cowichan.